According to Harvard Business Review, if you want to understand why some companies have a toxic culture, underperform relative to their potential, and eventually collapse, look no further than the quality of their leadership teams. Welcome to the Level Up Leader podcast. I am your host, Michael King. I'm an executive coach and founder of Teams.Coach. I work with C-level leaders to clarify and expand the vision, elevate performance, and level up their leadership. On today's podcast, I am joined by the one, the only John Michael Morgan. John Michael is a best-selling author and celebrated coach. I've been working with John Michael for a better part of the year, and John Michael is sincere, he's honest, he's brilliant. So please welcome John Michael to the podcast. The one, the only John Michael Morgan. Welcome to the Level Up Leader podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love this. I love this so much. I love the fact, like, it's kind of like one of those weird, bucket list type things to where it's like, I've gotten to know you a little, pretty decent over the last year, but I show up at a kind of like a retreat, a leadership thing. And you're there, you're speaking, you're sharing your story, and talking about just leadership in general. And I'm like, I got to get to know this guy. This guy feels like he's just part of a tribe that I don't belong to yet, but I need to get in. And that's kind of where this whole thing started, right?
Yeah, it did. But that's, I'm humbled by that, because I'm just me in my mind. But I appreciate it. That was fun. It was great meeting you, but then getting to know you has been great. So the love goes both ways, Michael.
Well, there's something that, I mean, for me, I'm in this season to where I'm taking more and more seriously every single day that the people that you have surrounding you and the voices that you have in your life really define the impact that your life can have. And I can't really be a good leader unless I'm taking seriously how I'm leading myself and allowing the voices in my life to impact how I live. So anyway, I'm really thankful. Thanks for your investment in my company and in me as a person. I know that the world is a better place because of John Michael Morgan. So,
oh my goodness, all right, we should just end it right there. That's perfect. That's great for me.
We're just gonna
need that clip.
Cut.
I know this.
That's
is
going to be
podcast,
that's going to be
my social media.
Well, it's going to be the cinema trailer right before everything else starts.
Right. Yes.
In the baritone
moment.
voiceover of like, the world is a better place because of John Michael Morgan. It's what gets everybody to listen. They're like leaning in going, okay, what is it? What's the secret sauce? So anyway, so you are, going all the way back. You're coaching high level organizations, high level leaders, major brands, best-selling author, etc. Tell me a little bit and tell our listeners a little bit about what makes you tick. What are you all about?
Goodness, that's a great question. I think one thing I've learned in my career is that I'm fascinated by the similarities between people. And what I mean is that the person who's the brand new leader that feels like they don't know what they're doing and they're uncomfortable and they're trying to create culture and lead well, they have some of the same issues that the person, who's CEO of, one of the top 10 brands in the world, struggles with. I find that fascinating because sometimes we assume that there's these big differences between people, and that there are some, but it's the commonalities that have always interested me. So my whole thing has been, how do I help people get and keep momentum? And that's in whatever area that they're trying to get momentum in. And that usually entails dealing with their mindset, dealing with their habits, sometimes leadership, sometimes their branding. It can be a combination of things, but it all comes down to, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to have momentum in what we're trying to build and how we're trying to lead and the message we're trying to share, with people. And I just feel like if I can play a small role in that, of helping someone get out of their own way long enough, because that's the real thing, is that most of the problems that people have that are actually holding them back, they're self-generated. It's not, it's not a lack of resources. It's not time. It's not, these other circumstances. Like, those all play a role for sure. But it's usually whatever's going on in here that's determining whether or not someone's hitting their goals.
Oh, absolutely. I can't even tell you how many times in the last couple decades, or actually take that back, like 4 decades, how many times I've actually self-destructed and, and gotten my own path um, along the way. Yeah, I mean, you talk to leaders every single day. Is what do you feel like is the number one thing that derails leaders?
Okay, this is my answer may shock people. Okay, but this is something that I've seen so much recently, and I love this question because it's been coming up in conversations every single day. The number one thing is boredom, right? I think there's a problem where
Mm,
people are so afraid of being bored, but what they don't realize is that a lot of success is boring. Now, the results are fun, right? The results are exciting, but what creates success is often boredom. It's doing the same thing every single day over and over and over again. And people think, oh, it's got to be more complicated than that. Or they've done it for 8 months and it's worked, but now they're bored, it's mundane, and they're like, oh, I should change it up. That the hardest thing is like to you start to get that momentum, just keep it. You've got to be okay with like being bored to some degree, and no one wants to talk about that, no one wants to hear it, but I see so many people who are like, oh, let's shake things up, and then it's a disaster. And I'm like, why are you shaking things up? Things were fine. Like, let's keep growing, let's keep doing what works, let's keep improving. But that's the thing that I see. And I'm talking everybody. I'm talking the person who feels like they're not even a leader, but they are, because I think everyone's a leader at home and amongst friends and these things. But even then the leader that's like, oh, I got 5,000 employees I'm leading or whatever. Every single person, it's like we somehow abandon what works because it becomes so routine, we think it's lost its effectiveness. When in reality, we're just bored.
well, it goes against the things that we're programmed for. One of the things that I tell our leaders all the time is that more, or the concept of more, it's what we've been ingrained to actually fundamentally believe that unless you actually get more, you're not growing. Unless you get more, you're not succeeding. Unless you have more, you're not a success. But more is actually the enemy of progress. And so there's a huge difference. It's the thing of, like, as you know, it's like, I was a pastor for a couple decades, and I truly believe that, like, even looking back over the life of David, that pinnacle moment when he's sitting up on top of his house looking over at something that's not his, this thing here, it changes the trajectory of time. Like, that
Yeah.
single moment right there, that moment, if David could have said, you know what, I think me being bored is okay. I think me being okay with not having something that's not mine, or me not wanting more, is okay. Because
Yeah.
progress looks different, doesn't it?
It does, man. It does. And I hear every single day, I hear people say, I need to get back to doing X, Y, and Z. Oh, I need to get back to my morning routine. I need to get back to journaling or meditating. I need to get back to, doing, one-on-one conversations with my team and just like connecting with them on a human, personal level. And these things, I'm like, the phrase, let me get back to these things. It's like, well, why did you ever get away from them? Yeah, but it's exactly
Yeah,
what you said. It's that pursuit of, oh, I need more. I need to do more, be more, get more, all of that. And it's like, what's the way? Sometimes getting more doesn't mean adding more to our life. Sometimes we can actually achieve more by doing less. And, sometimes even achieve more by letting the process run. But no one seems to want to do
100%.
that.
Well, if somebody would have came to me, because I think sometimes we start to chase things down because our motivations are built out of insecurity instead of security. Like, if somebody would have came to me and said, hey, Mike, I don't know, 20 years ago, and said, you don't really have anybody to impress. You're great at what you do. Just keep knocking it out of the park. Be innovative in the spaces that you're supposed to be in, but you don't have to keep doing more. Well, I probably would. It's like I went through a season of burnout and self-discovery, because all these noises around me were trying to tell me that I wasn't good enough. Um,
Right.
so what do you say about that?
Yeah, man. I think that thought of not being good enough, it ultimately comes down to we have to dig deeper, which is, good enough for what? Not good enough for whom? Right? Like there are very few people who think they're really like amazingly qualified for the role they have. Right? This is why I'm fascinated, because regardless of political parties, the ego one has to have to say, out of everyone in this country, you know who'd be best at running it? Me. Like that's a different level of ego that someone has to just be like, I
Right.
think I can do a better job than the rest of you. Most of us in business, most of us in leadership roles, we don't feel that way. Instead, we're waking up going, when do they find out I don't know what I'm doing? When do they find out, that I'm making it all up as I go? But that's the thing, is like we actually have all that in common, and leaders are afraid to show that. Leaders are afraid to show that. I worked with a leader who made a ton of money, and his biggest fear was that people would realize he didn't always have the answers. And I'm like, but your team would love to know that. They'd love to help you. That would actually be a relief to them to know that you're human. And
Right.
so we have to go back to like, what are we even measuring against? And sometimes in society we think we have these things that we have to achieve because society told us to, or in leadership it's like, oh, these are the benchmarks we're supposed to hit, or in business or whatever it may be. And it's like, what are we really, like when we get in that comparison game, what are we really measuring? The thing that I've learned is that if you're going to compare yourself to someone else, if you're going to compare yourself to what the expectations even of others or whatever, or even the expectation you have of yourself, you have to play fair. Otherwise, it doesn't count. So what I mean by that is if you're sitting there saying, I'm not good enough because of all these things, and here's my list of poor qualities, you have to also make a list of the good qualities. Because no one's 100% good and no one's 100% bad. The answer is always in between. That's reality. But see, that's the problem, is like we look at someone else and they're like perfect in our mind. We look at ourselves and we're not even good at all. We just rip ourselves to shreds. Like we bully ourselves. And it's like, wait a minute. That's fine. If you're going to do the negative self-talk, do it, but you have to do the positive as well. Otherwise, it's not accurate. And what happens then is when they start listing out the good, they calm down and they can kind of remove themselves from this negative story that they start playing out.
I think that you're nailing it on the head. And just like in any, and I think anybody that's listening to this, and I'm pretty sure that if you were to take this and put this kind of this summary over any type of relationship, we have relationships with people and we base the success on the relationship with that person as far as like how fruitful it is. And here's the thing is that when I go home tonight and hang out with my family, I'm not going to be in the mood to, thinking about whether or not the relationship is successful or whether I'm a good leader. If I'm walking into my home and all they're doing is pointing out what a failure I am, all the different things that I've dropped the ball on or whatever. I didn't take the dog to the groomers or whatever it is, but it's overwhelming when you start that process of like, hey, let me remind you like how much you suck. Like your brain immediately shuts off.
Yeah.
But we do that to ourselves as well. It's like every coaching relationship that I have, but also every friendship that I have. Like my drummer who travels with me, we went and did this event last night, and I've seen him grow so much. Like he's a good friend, but I've also seen him grow just through the positivity of having a good tribe to belong to. Like my guys in the group, they're like consistently calling him out. Like, man, when you go into that pocket, when you get locked into that groove and in that tempo, like him being told the things that he's great at instead of being consistently told all the ways that he's constantly dropping the ball. Because he actually does kind of suck as a person, by the way. Like he's actually pretty horrible. I'm just kidding. Andrew, if he's listening, he's like, I knew this was coming.
He's a great drummer, but everything else.
But no, you think about that, right? Is like you have to be able to lead with the power of recognizing your victories as much as your challenges.
So you're touching on something that's so important to me, because no one really wants to talk about this aspect of leadership and growth and positivity and even just good self-talk and how we view ourselves. So the thing is, like, first of all, we can't outperform our opinion of ourselves. Like, whatever we think of ourselves, that's the ceiling. So we have to change that. But the other aspect of this that becomes really interesting in a leadership role, and I want somehow to change this. Like, if I could change the world, I think this would be it, which, probably I should pick something else. But this would be the thing I would do to change the world, which is imagine if a leader, like if their love language is words of affirmation. The problem is most leaders don't get that. I think about this. Like, I think about LeBron James. What if words of affirmation is his love language? Because no one probably comes up to him and says, hey, man, just so you know, like, you're really great at basketball. They probably stopped that when he was in like third grade. But what if he's sitting there in the locker room and he's like, it'd be really nice if somebody would tell me that I'm good. Instead, all he gets is, he's good, but he's not as good as Michael Jordan. And it's like, what do we do? Right? Like, I mean, I grew up in the Jordan era. I understand the opinions on it. But my thing is, like, what if he needs that? And I think about that. Like, we assume that a leader is confident. We assume that they know we appreciate them. We assume, all these things. And it's like, no, they're sitting there in isolation wondering, am I doing okay? Am I messing this up? And I don't know what happened in the world where we got so like weird and afraid to like compliment people and, lift them up. But to me, like, if I could wave a magic wand and change culture in any organization or team, that would be it. It is like, to be like, hey, can we just actually encourage each other, and especially the leadership, because they need it more than anybody. And there's something about that role that makes it where we just, we're like, oh, we assume they know. They get it. We know. Like, I had a client one time, Michael, who told me, they go, we were talking, like, well, you know how much you mean to me. And I'm like, time out. No, I don't. Tell me. It's on my fridge, like, I need to hear this because, words of affirmation are my love language. And so
I haven't gotten a Christmas card from you in 5 years.
Right. It's that thing, because when we're left alone, our mind and that story, can spin negative. And it's, oh my gosh, how does my team really feel about me? How does my family feel about me, or my friends, or, my coworkers, or whatever, right? Like, we play these weird games with ourselves. And so I just wish we could somehow change that to, let people know, like, hey, you're doing a good job, and not be afraid to tell them that, even time and time again.
You'd mentioned something earlier about, like, if I could change the culture within an organization, I think we should do that. We should tag team up and just like create, the Justice League of coaches and consultant. I'm just messing with you.
Great. And our superpower can just be compliments. So we just walk in and we just tell everybody, like, that jacket's amazing, and I love that hat, and you're doing great, and way to sit at that computer, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, in all seriousness, though, that we're talking about something that's operational and also philosophical at the same time. So for example, like one of the things of, like, okay, so one of my tricks, and it's actually true, is and I'll show you how this is true. But when I'm working with a team, one of the first things that I do is I actually start working with senior leadership and then also key leaders within the team to get them programmed to recognize that them being able to quickly, not delayed, but in real time, being able to quickly identify and celebrating wins along the way creates synergy. Now, the reason is here's where the functionality comes in on it, is if I can get a leader to identify the things that they do better than everybody else, and then quickly adjust their bandwidth and their resources to only support the things that they do better than everybody else. Not saying we're going to ignore the things that they fail at, but by taking some of that energy because typically what ends up happening is that we put 80% of our energy towards the things that we fail at, and only 20% of the things that come easy to us, the things that we win. Well, think about it. It's like, let's start off tomorrow and recognize, like, hey, this is what you do better than everybody else, and I want you to just live in that for a while. Yeah,
it's so powerful, because science has showed us the way the mind and brain work is that whatever we put our attention on, it assumes is important. So it just tries to find more of that. So if you're only focused on this is what we're weak at, this is my weakness, this is where I'm failing, your mind isn't saying, oh no, that's bad. It's saying, he's thinking about this a lot, or she really, dwells on this. Let me go find more of it. Let me go find more evidence of it. And so when you talk about celebrating wins, it's like that's so important because it's that classic thing. We have a failure and we sit on it for weeks. We have a win and everybody's like, oh yeah, that's great. And then we go right back to work. It's like we celebrated the victory for 3 seconds and we celebrated the failure, I say celebrate because like it's the attention, for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's and like, yeah, I love that you make it operational. See, that's where you're good. You actually tell them what to do.
I don't, I wish I was, I hope I'm good at it. I love what I do, but here's the thing is that, but it comes down to our motivations and our why, right? So the spaces that I'm in, I get faced with this reality that these are real facts. 71% of everybody who's occupied C-level leadership spots in the last 2 years have considered quitting or vacating their roles. And it could be because of burnout. But if you think about the mentality of somebody who wants to leave their spot, it's because they're showing up every single day thinking that they failed. And that's why you want to quit. It's just like, man, I suck. I don't want to do this. But if I can help somebody see it, even just fundamentally in their life, just like kind of like how you've helped us be more innovative, you've helped me be more innovative, and to lead from a place of security and understanding what I am capable of versus just looking at my failures. I want that for the organizations that I serve as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my heart breaks for that statistic that you just shared, for the people that feel stuck, like, oh, I'm not enjoying it. I don't think I'm good at it. In reality, they probably are fine, or a few tweaks and they could be brilliant at it. And they're on an island. They don't know what to do, which is probably, why they're considering, oh, I'll leave and, the grass will be greener over here or whatever. And it's, that mindset shows up in everything. That I think the big reason a lot of people settle in their life and in business and in their career is often because they didn't know that they were actually doing good at the thing they were trying to do. So they settled for less.
Ooh, that's good.
Right. Let me take a lower role. Let me, do this or whatever. It's like, in reality, maybe they were doing fine. Maybe they were on the path. Things take time, and for some reason in the business world, we've lost all sense of patience. And then companies wonder why there's so much turnover.
That's good.
Like, every company I know, they'll ask me, they'll be like, how do we hire talent? And I'm like, you take your time. You take your time, because you can either go out there and try to find talent that exists, that's available, but if they're talented, are they ever available? So the way you find talent is you create it.
Oh, that's good.
Right? Bring in people,
develop
train them, build them up, turn them into talent. So
that's absolutely, that's 100% true. But you do find that is that people end up making very, very fast, big mistakes because they're impatient. And they, I'm thinking about right now, here in Nebraska, we ended up firing our football coach after the first 3 football games of the season for University of Nebraska. Not that that's a different thing, like for a different show, different podcast. But it's just amazing how fast we make decisions when we're not getting the results that we want. And we end up making the wrong hires quickly.
Yeah.
Because we feel
I think about that same thing. I don't know anything about Nebraska other than that you're there. But, I think about it. Like I saw week 2 of the NFL season, NFL.com had an article and it was like, these were the coaches on the hot seat. You know what I mean? 2 weeks in, like, right. These people were fine 2 weeks ago. And now, they're on the hot seat. Like, holy crap. And how do we expect to ever attract good coaches in that sense, right? Because here's the thing, like, I mean, maybe you love the sport, you love the game, you love your players and all that, but coaching is leadership. And why go into a scenario where one mistake cost you your leadership role versus going and just doing your own thing and building it up? And, it's like we reward the wrong things so much. This whole, like, what have you done for me lately mentality that happens in life and in business is harming so many organizations, and they just don't even understand why. And what's also hilarious about this, by the way, is, like, I know of a company, publicly traded company, so I won't mention their name. They have a CEO that not everybody likes. I get it. And everyone's like, well, why haven't they let him go? And it's like, well, who else do they get? Until they know who that replacement is, they can't rush into a decision, because
Right.
then they're just going to fill the spot with a warm body. And then exactly everything else you and I are talking about is what's going to happen. Then the new person gets in and they go, holy smokes, I'm not ready for this. Am I good enough? Am I qualified enough? Can I do this? And they're full of all kinds of doubt. And now they're under the microscope because everyone's like, you have to be better than the other person because we just fired them. So now we expect you to perform miracles. And it's like,
100%.
right? So whoever they get as the new coach of your football team, everyone's going to be like, well, you need to win right now. And it's like, what if the player drops the ball? The coach didn't tell them to do that, right? So now there's a fumble. It costs them the game. This poor sucker's job is, now on the line. It's messed up.
I felt so bad. This is like a true story. So I felt so bad for after they lost like their first 3 games that I posted it on social media and I offered free executive coaching for everybody that was a coach on the football team for the first 90 days. I'm like, yeah, I know you're paying your staff millions of dollars a year to be football coaches. But this is not about money. I will actually do it for free because I care about my state. Because when our football team loses, the whole emotional psychology of our state goes into the tank. Like,
yeah.
It's like mass depression in the state of Nebraska.
That's another topic we've got to cover sometimes. How to fix that.
Gladly.
Not place your identity in the success of a sports team, but people do, man. It's that's it. It's all fascinating. I'm not sitting here saying that, like, hey, leadership doesn't has its perks, because obviously people in these roles sometimes get paid a ton of money, and they knew what they were getting into, right? That's the other thing. People are like, well, they knew what they signed up for. It's like, yeah, to a degree, but that doesn't mean that it's the right thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, there were people in Roman days that were, gladiators in the arena. I'm like, yeah, they knew what they signed up for, but that doesn't mean that it was fair, that while they're fighting, lions got released behind them. So now they've got, a lion behind them and the dude with the sword in front of them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, where do we draw the line on stuff to sort of make some of these changes? And I think that when we don't protect leaders and we don't create pathways for new leaders to come in, we're going to have a real problem in the future, because the good leaders aren't going to want to do it. And not, again, to get political, but this has been the problem forever. I'm 42 years old, so I'll just trash everybody. My entire life, this has been the problem politically, is that everyone smart enough to run the country is smart enough to not run to do it. Because we've created this system where it's like, now what? And that's the thing. And so we have to stop and look at that. And we're seeing it in the church world, right? We're seeing it in the church world. Who would want to be the pastor of a megachurch right now? Because it's a ticking clock until, you get trashed for something. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not envious of the people in those roles. It's the same thing as, a CEO or C-suite. Like, yeah, the money can be good, but, everything else that comes with it, if we don't make a change, we're going to lose our great leaders. And so we've got to create pathways where these really smart, talented people not only get the chance to be a leader, but we help them and we nurture them. So someone's
absolutely.
Like, now someone's in a C-suite role and she makes a mistake. We need to be like, hey, here's why that's okay. Here's what we're going to learn from it. Because we see the bigger picture that we're trying to get you to be CEO, and those type of things.
Well, and it comes down to, as a leader, just in general, is it possible for me to be able to see greatness and potential in other people? And that's the thing that when it comes to developing something into the internal culture and the underbelly of an organization, because we actually need organizations, we actually need our churches, we actually need bigger companies to, support, innovation and progress within our communities. But you're right. The thing is that like the last 5 Gen Zers that I've talked to, they would rather go off and just build something that's software based that they can run out of their garages or out of their homes instead of actually working in a big accountable system of an organization or a company, because they don't want to be shot at.
Right. And what happens in the future with that? When we're not, like you said, identifying who these potential leaders are, and then nurturing them, training them, and also like, I think again, because we have this like, what have you done for me lately kind of mentality, anyone that doesn't quote unquote have a perfect record ends up losing the opportunity. And what's crazy about that to me, Michael, is like when we look at the people who built the biggest companies in the world, none of them had the perfect record. They failed all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, gosh, what's our future if we stop giving people room to make a mistake and room to grow? I don't know.
This is good. So I'm gonna pause us here. I think we need to schedule a round 2 with John Michael Morgan, because this is like, we can do this all day. I feel like Captain America. We can do this all day.
I'm just glad you picked a Marvel superhero and not a DC superhero. No, don't do it. Don't do it. I knew it. No.
So, but we've talked about a couple of things. I love this though. Some of the keywords that popped up here. We talked about motivations. We talked about mindsets. We've talked about behaviors, and we've talked about voices or influences. So good, man. Really appreciate that. If people want to get a hold of you, how do they do it?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is johnmichaelmorgan.com. They can, email me from there. They can see all my different social channels and, connect to me there and, say hi anytime.
I love it. Now, as people are listening to this, we want to encourage people to head over to the Level Up Leader podcast group. You're actually in it as well. And so people will be asking some questions in real time and things like that. So I want to encourage people to get into the Level Up Leader podcast group, join John Michael Morgan, and be one of the cool kids. It's just,
I would love that, because I would love to talk to people. So if they've got questions, need help with something, jump in that group and we can talk.
Awesome. Hey, man, thank you so much for all you do. And thank you for just being a cool dude, man. Such a privilege to interview you.
Thank you, man. It was my pleasure. I would come back anytime.
So thank you for joining us today on the Level Up Leader podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps get the word out. And make sure to like, subscribe, and to follow so you get all of our content. Now, John Michael spends a lot of time talking about how we need to rewrite our identity to achieve success. I know that was a really big deal for me. It is so easy to believe the lies of your past or to be held hostage by the voices around us. There is a good leader in all of us. Sometimes we need to rewrite our identity to find our true path. A special thank you to our featured artists, Names Without Numbers, for allowing us to use their music. We decided we wanted to feature only music that I've actually produced in the studio. So thank you so much, guys. I love that we get to do this together. To find out more about everything that we're up to, check us out at www.Teams.Coach, and don't forget to like our Facebook group, Teams.Coach/levelupleaders.